So wait, winter just ended and now all of a sudden it's the harvest in the fall? What the hell happened to the other two seasons? This is ridiculous. All right, nobody in the audience that doesn't exist for my videos, even though I don't really care or want an audience. This is just for me to force myself to play these video games and close the chapter on them in my life, get them done. But yeah, it's Skwatter here with another cheat-assisted playthrough here. So yeah, no, I've been trying to play games more regularly and more frequently instead of taking several weeks, if not several months, in between playing games like I have been. So I think that I have been uh, sort of adhering to that new kind of paradigm that I am attempting to crowbar into my free time here. So, yeah, that sounds pretty good there. So, this game that I played is called Dungeon Master Theron's Quest on the TurboGrafx Super CD-ROM system. So, actually, I should have said CD-ROM because it's got the superscript too. That's how you would pronounce it. At least that's what I've read there. But yeah, no, a bit of history on this one. My dad, back in the early 90s, he bought a copy of the Super Nintendo Dungeon Master that he would play on his own because we were all too young to understand what was going on there. And my dad kind of cherished that game. He loved his save file on that game, so what he did throughout my childhood was that while he had kind of shied away from playing video games in the ensuing years after that, he would always keep his copy of Dungeon Master sealed in plastic and sitting on the top shelf of a bookcase in his office in the basement there. And I would always look up at it, of course, not being tall enough to get it in my youth, wondering just what kind of game it was and why it was so important, why it was so forbidden. So once I got tall enough to procure said game, I secretly stole it away and I took it over to my friend's house who lived across the street from me. And we started playing it together. And what I didn't realize, and what we both, I should say, didn't realize at the time, was that the Super Nintendo version of Dungeon Master only had room for a single save file. So, yeah, we did not realize it, but we had unfortunately saved over my father's save file, which was quite a bit far into the game. So my dad always took that as kind of a personal attack on him, even though it, of course, was not in any way, shape, or form malicious or intentional. But so that was sort of my first exposure to Dungeon Master, and that was, of course, in the mid '90s. So I never really we just kind of messed around, me and my friend, with the Dungeon Master on Super Nintendo. We never really got too far or deep into it. We didn't have the instruction manual, so of course we were just sort of flying by the seat of our pants, not really knowing what to do first off. So we would have to, do by trial and error. Okay, in order to eat things, you got to put them to your mouth, and to read things, you got to put them to your eye. And I don't think I ever, in my old '90s playthrough of this game on the Super Nintendo with my friend, ever encountered a chest that you would need to open because that was I'm not sure if it's in these clips that I'm showing you here, but at one point I find a treasure chest, and I just for the life of me can't figure out how to open it. And I kind of want to try and see if I can figure it out for myself. I kind of don't want to be led by the hand through any of the games that I play only when I really need it, right? Especially with these monotonous dungeons where every single wall looks the same. You can easily find yourself turned around. And just as a side point, I realized that the hunter character with the bow, kind of a useless weapon if you ask me. Here's the box there. Yeah, no, I'm desperately trying to figure it out. Like, look at this. Like, I put it to my eye and I can see what's in there, but I can't seem to open it up. So I try putting it to that hand, but no, I have to put it to my left hand. Because who knows, right? Yeah, and I try shifting it onto different characters. Maybe I just didn't have a an open inventory, enough open inventory spaces. But yeah, no. So that yeah, there you go. I finally get it now. So yeah, we never really got super far into my first playthrough of, and it wasn't even a playthrough. It was just basically just messing around when we had time to play video games. And so we just basically kind of lost interest in it because we just really didn't have the know-how or the patience to go through the entire rigmarole. Honestly. Um, so, oh yeah, and I was going to say about the hunter. I just realized that the hunter, with the useless bow and arrow, because you had to equip the arrows to him. It's not like you could just equip the bow and it would just automatically give you arrows, right? I mean, quality of life improvements like that would be a godsend to a game like this if it was ever remade. But the hunter has a compass, and I only really figured out that that was the case in maybe the last couple of levels I played. So I actively chose him proactively because, and of course I thought it's like, well, it looks like I can interact with his inventory before resurrecting him. So I thought maybe I could remove his compass and give it to Theron or something. Nope, not the case. But so yeah, I would say that the hunter character, while certainly not a very good fighter, I guess you could just equip him with a different weapon, but always resurrect the hunter because he has the compass, which is what I would consider a godsend, especially, as I said, the yes, and then I figure out I have to read up how to cast the magic torch spell, which is why I use the female character, the priestess or the witch, whatever she is, in order to illuminate the dungeons. Because while torches are just as effective as anything else would be, they can burn out, and then if you don't know what you're doing, then you're going to be running around in the dark, right? Yeah, no. These dungeons are very monotonous. You can easily find yourself, even in a perfectly square room. I found myself having no idea where I was and easily getting disoriented. So having the compass later on in the game, which is something that I should have figured out earlier, it would have made my life a whole lot easier. Even though I would go to the Dungeon Master Encyclopedia, they would have simple, crude machine code maps drawn up, and they were certainly a help. But again, it's like I could never really position myself in the dungeon until I got the compass. I would never know which direction I was facing, uh, and like I would try desperately to look for identifying factors like say an oracle of rebirth or an altar of rebirth or whatever they're called. Of which I did not use a single one of them throughout the entire game because I did not take the initiative to look up what they did. I sort of already had the idea that you could put your character's bones there and resurrect them, but my characters only died in one of the dungeon levels. Of course, fighting the dragon Shadowdan. I think that's him. The Den of Shadowdan. Yeah. So that was probably, I would say, the hardest part of this game was the fight with the dragon. And if it wasn't for my hex edited codes that I had to freeze Theron's health, then it's likely I just simply wouldn't have been able to beat this game. I do not have the patience to figure out how to use like the full bombs or to strategically cast spells like Flame Shield. I did that a few times, like because at one point in one of the dungeons there was a hallway that you had to run through, and you were constantly being bombarded by fireballs, right? And of course, it's like I didn't want the rest of my characters to die. Although I guess what I'm talking about now is something that I should discuss. As you know, I use hex editors like Art Money and Cheat Engine, though mainly Art Money, to find values and freeze them in the game to make them easier, right? Because Beetle PCE, the emulator that I'm using to play this game on in RetroArch, does not support emulator console cheat codes, even though they are all inside the cheat.zip file that you can download from RetroArch. So kind of seems a little uh, counterintuitive, cheat codes that just don't work. And believe me, it's not immediately obvious that they do or don't, because sometimes like you have to make sure that you apply the cheats after you activate them, or you have to select the option that says apply cheats immediately after activating them. So yeah, that was a kind of a crash course, especially with the Dungeon Explorer games. Sorry. So I would use art money to find the hex values, or I guess the decimal values you would call them, through the hex addresses for the four champions' health and mana. At very least, I don't really care about their stamina. I've never run into a case where my characters were out of stamina, but so I was able to very easily find Theron's health, mana, and then the mana for the other two or three characters, depending on who had it. But it just seemed absolutely, utterly impossible for me to identify the hex address that corresponded to the health values for my other three companions. It just didn't work. Like, I searched up, I had the process selected, Beetle PCE RetroArch. I had the process selected. I did a search of all values, not just emulator values, because that's a giant waste of time. And so I would try it, like, it would say this guy has 450 HP, so I would search for 450 HP, and then I'd have my characters run into a wall a few times, because that actually damages you. And so then I would activate the in-game menu, go to their inventory screen so I could see what their health values had decreased to. And I would, through trial and error, I realized that it's best to hardware pause the game using the emulator hotkey to pause the game, because the characters rapidly regain health, which I was not aware of back in the 90s when I first played this game on the Super Nintendo. So I would do all that, and I would say, okay, so this guy's health decreased from 450 down to 447, so I'd search for a value that was once 450 and then went down presently to 447. I'd click search, and 0 results. So, well, shit. I don't know what to do when it comes to that. When it comes to that point, honestly, I tried a lot. Honestly, like I would pause the recording and I would try for half an hour, 45 minutes at a time, trying to figure this thing out, because I mean it's, based off of my low skill level and low patience level, I would need these values to be frozen or at least modified in some way. But yeah, here we go. Yeah, I was constantly being bombarded by the flames there. Yeah, my God, it's like I had to cut so much out of I have to cut so much out of this one gameplay snippet, because like my characters just kept on dying, right? So I just decided to. They said like there was a scroll there and it said like, "Don't stop, just dodge" or something, and I'm just like, might as well just run through it as fast as I can, cast a spell of Flame Shield, and hopefully my characters don't feel that bad, because as I said, I was able to freeze the character's mana value, so I could use the Priestess Lady to generate health potions. That is, of course, only if I had a flask, right? Yeah, I mean, the mechanics in this game, some would call them realistic. I would call them micromanaging, especially, as I said, with the hunter's bow and arrows. Like, you can only have maybe 5 arrows in your quiver at once, so I mean, it's like, and you can pick arrows back up after you use them, right? But I mean, like, they are in very short supply, and I noticed that you see up in the top right hand corner, you've got the green guy, the yellow guy, the blue guy, and the red guy. So, and they all correspond to the character's colors of their health and mana and stamina. So that means that it's Theron on the upper left. Just lean in here. Theron on the upper right. Mara, it looks like. I'm just viewing it through a very, very small video window on Cyberlink Power Director, the worst video editing software in the world. She's the red one in the bottom right, and then Hakar is the blue one in the bottom left. Now, in these game mechanics that micromanage, it turns out that if an enemy that's attacking you is not facing in the perfect straight line that your character is facing, and you've selected that character to attack that enemy, they will always miss, right? So right now Mara is in the bottom right. So if I was fighting a monster on the left, Mara's and Tyrion's attacks would miss all the time. And I thought, wow, that that is ridiculous. Like that is positively ludicrous. I mean, like, and you can kind of swap them out and everything, right? But I mean, my God, like it's such busy work. It is such micromanaging, and it's so unintuitive with the fact that you have to drag a cursor around the screen, because of course there's no mouse support, and I'm not even sure if there's mouse support on the original Super Nintendo version, right? I mean, it would certainly help out, but if you use the mouse on the Super Nintendo version, and should it happen to work, if it even does, I would say that it would be in certain ways less intuitive because you could press and hold as you can in this game on the Turbo controller. You can press and hold a button, and you can use the directional pad to immediately select forward, backward, turn left, turn right. So that kind of truncates the stress of having to drag your cursor all around the screen, clicking on the directional buttons to go wherever you want. Because, as I said, while this game is very clunky and you move around in 90-degree turns and one square block at a time every time you click forward, backward, left, and right. Uh, you would not think that they would force you in this game to do any kind of complex or breakneck platforming maneuvers. But you'd be wrong. They do that all the time. Here I am confronted with a whole bunch of mummies. But, so yeah, I mean, it's like at numerous points you have to run through a hallway because there are randomly appearing pits that will cause you to fall down to the next level, or there are moving walls of teleporting energy that will basically shove you across an entire room, and then push you down another hole. And it's like, my God, please, like, give me some respite here. And so I just got that shield there, one of the 7. Yeah, nice transition there, huh? There you go. Thank you, Cyberlink. But yeah, so I'm just showing you the first dungeon and the last dungeon because it had the opening cutscene and the closing cutscene and everything. There's really no final big boss other than the Den of Shadowdan, which depending on uh, which dungeons you do in which succession, I think that was maybe my 6th dungeon that I did. Um, yeah, there's no big ending boss battle. In fact, this very last level was kind of a letdown. It was not very climactic or anything, and it was. Oh, well, I mean, these characters, like, fuck these characters, honestly. Like, these characters that were partially corporeal and partially formless, like, oh my God. Like, I had to like reload save files because my characters were just dying so much because like I'd try attacking them and my attacks would just miss. Like again, right there, like the character was in the middle, so that means that all 4 characters can attack, right? The enemy was in the middle of the screen, so all 4 characters can attack it. However, if the enemy was on either side of the screen, not in the center, but in either left or right, then your corresponding, and one of my characters just died, and I had to load the game there, yeah. So if one of your characters was not directly facing in the perfect line of fire, then your character would not be able to attack the enemy, which, my God, awful, right? Um, and of course, it's like this was like 1992, and Dungeon Master's from like 1987, right? So I'm just kind of surprised that they didn't add a few quality of life improvements just to the functions and the mechanics and physics and stuff like that, right? So yeah, again, it's like if you're playing these levels and you're looking at these maps that thankfully Dungeon Master Encyclopedia has, you'll still very quickly find yourself getting lost because, as I said, all the floors, all the walls, they're all just blank gray walls. Sometimes they might have little buttons, little switches that are on different heights on the walls and stuff like that. And of course, if you miss that, then it's like, oh man, awful, right? Like you won't know what you're doing, honestly, and you'll just be sitting there and getting frustrated, and then you'll probably just lose your temper and then just decide to quit the game, right? But oh, and these fucking fires, right? Like these fires, they take so many hits to destroy, right? And like I don't even know if it's necessary to destroy them in certain cases. Like sometimes they're blocking your way and things like that. But I mean, if you stand 2 squares away from them, then you can basically just blast it with magic or attack it until it dies. And I was just like, my God, are these things like immortal or something? Because it's like I'm casting spell after spell after spell, the most powerful spell that I can think of, and there you go. See, it's attacking me and everything, right? And it's like, finally, there you go, right? Like in certain cases, I had to look up videos of what to do, like to get through certain parts of the game, like especially. Like at one point, I think this was in the first level, like I had to go to a teleporter, go into the teleporter, back out, into the teleporter, back out, then turn around and then move really quickly 3 spaces forward. And I'm thinking like, man, like how would you figure this out? Like everything, it would have to be trial and error. And of course, at the time that these games were released, they expected you to use graph paper, grid paper to draw your own maps, to plot them out and everything. And I thought, the things that we as gamers used to do, like, I remember playing games sort of like this. Again, it's like we played it back in the 90s on the Super Nintendo, but it's like, man, we didn't write out maps here. I mean, that's just a ridiculous like aspect. I mean, it's like I wouldn't expect anybody to do that. But so yeah, no. Normally, my obsessive nature would cause me to, since I've started and played through this game, like it would force me to say it's like, I can't close the book on this game until I've beaten every game in the series. But I've been looking this thing up, and it says differences from the original. Theron's quest contains 7 small dungeons instead of one big dungeon, which, however, are partially identical or inspired by the original dungeons of Dungeon Master and Chaos Strikes Back, that being its expansion set. So, to be honest, I feel like I've gotten my fill, based on that true information, I've gotten my fill of both the first and the expansion pack, and then other than that, so basically, I feel like I've experienced the first, the expansion pack, this game, and then I think there's Dungeon Master 2 Skull Keep, and then after that there's Dungeon Master Nexus, which I know got recently translated for the Sega Saturn. Now, I don't think, I don't want to play Dungeon Master 2 Skull Keep, and I'm not really partial to Dungeon Master Nexus. I mean, being that it's on the Sega Saturn, I mean, maybe it could have, better graphics, maybe the dungeons won't be as monotonous, maybe they'll have, better, higher resolution, more features and objects on walls that will make it easier to figure out where you're going. Maybe it'll have an auto mapping feature where you can know exactly where you are and figure out where you're going without having to look up all these different walkthroughs and having to draw your own maps and everything. But like that's way down, far down the line. So as far as I'm concerned, I've played 3 games in the series. So I'm going to say I've had my fill of this monotonous, same wall, same floor, same ceiling, dungeon crawling, Dungeon Master game series. So, but, again, it's like, and the funny thing is that I think it would have been a way better game if they had allowed all of your characters and not just Theron to retain their inventories and their developed skills and the levels achieved and everything like that, because it just feels like you're being kicked right back to the beginning, and it just doesn't seem like because of that fact, it just doesn't really seem that any dungeon is any harder than any of the others, right? So you would think that the dungeons would get progressively harder, but I mean, some of the most stress that I had during this game was during the earliest dungeons there, you know. And there were a few times where I'm just like, shit, right? Like, have I, soft locked the game? Because at one point, like, I needed to have a giant scorpion thing step on a pressure pad in the floor in order to close up a chasm that was impeding my way, and I had to do several reloads and thinking like what am I doing? Like, is one of my cheats like messing this up? And to be honest, at around this point here, I've just found the executioner, I think the sword is called. And the first time that I brought it back to the altar to be replaced there, I had put it down on the altar, and the level ended, and then it gave me the little title card where it says, Theron has acquired the executioner. Press any button. So I pressed the button, and it just hung there, right? So I'm just like, shit, what's going on here? So I tried like fast forwarding and stuff like that, and it's like, my God, it's just not progressing, right? So I was thinking, shit. Well, the only thing that I can think is happening is one or more of my hex values that I have frozen in Art Money is impeding the game from progressing, because since the game went from a playable level immediately into a cutscene, maybe the hex values that I have frozen are now no longer associated with health and mana, and now need to be able to be modified by the game's OS and system, right? So had to rewind and do that, do a bit of the dungeon over again. I had to reload my save states. Thank God for the save states, honestly. Um, so I had to do that again, and after I just before I had replaced the executioner in the alcove, I unfroze the values, and that was the thing that was stopping me from progressing the game to the ending cutscene. So everything ended up working there, but of course I had to chop out that glitched segment out there, which is kind of a pain in the ass, because Cyberlink Power Director really takes a long time to render game footage when you need to chop up clips, delete certain lengths of footage, splice in images and stuff like that. So it can take like an hour and a half can take like 5 minutes to render if you're just, say, rendering it in lower quality slightly in order to make it faster to upload, which I need to do as of recent because I've now got low income internet, which is only 3.25 megabytes per second upload. So, and of course I went from having like 150 megabits. I know I'm sort of saying megabytes and megabits, but yeah, no, it's pretty much like 1/8 or something. I've never been good with numbers. That's probably wrong, but it's a whole lot slower than what it used to be. So now I always have to fight with Cyberlink Power Director. I think it's 19, version 19, and I didn't just get this off a glitchy Russian hack site. Like, I actually paid for this and everything, and yeah, see, there you go. Like, I'm struggling, with that. It's like, oh, I have to have a guy on the left attack the guys on the left and everything. So, but yeah, no, this is, it was satisfying to beat this game, but I very quickly tired of it, right? Like, and just simply the fact that I would get lost so often just makes me never want to engage with the games in this series again if they're going to behave the same way, right? So yeah, like I replace it, and then here's the little cutscene, and I have these videos sped up like 5 times, right? So, and still, like, you're looking at these cutscenes, it's like you would have to wait 5 times longer for each one of these scenes to progress, right? And you're thinking, wow, that's a long time to just sit there at a single screen and having only a few, little graphical changes happen. This is, a little bit more exciting and everything, right? That was advertised on the back of the box, so you could possibly get a seizure from looking at that flashing red thing. But yeah, no. So, I mean, that was the game. I feel like I've played all of the originals in the series, because some of the dungeons came from both the first and the expansion, as well as this game, of which they are all uh, put in, and look at that. Everything is nice again, and it goes from fall to, I guess, spring and summer, just like that, and it skips winter. Okay, so these credits kind of confuse me because I'm not sure if it was either developed originally by the Japanese team or by the U.S. team because my dad would usually buy American games. But yeah, I mean, so I guess that's it. Victor Musical Industries. I guess that's it. That's my ramble, and here we go. Skwatter out.